Another edition of The Travel Show with your host, Ted Blank of Ted Blank Luxury Travel and Adventure. And we are learning so much about all the places we can go and explore. And we're going to do a new topic today, which I'm very excited to dig into. And that is trains. We'll get to that in a second. First of all, how have you been? Have you done any luxury traveling and adventures since I've seen you last?
Minnesota, Wisconsin. Yep, I made it to Iowa. That was as far as I made.
I think that's fine. Yeah, I think that's fine. Why not enjoy this area of the world during this beautiful time that we have here, this wonderful, wonderful summer?
Oh, absolutely. And if anybody ever tells you that Iowa is flat, they're lying. There are a lot of hills in Iowa.
There are.
I can't imagine those people who ride their bikes across Iowa every year for that big bike ride. No way.
No way. No way. So we are going to travel by train. That is something that I think everybody romanticizes, but it really is true, isn't it? It's just a whole nother way to see
it is, the world. And it's so relaxing. You know, you don't have to drive, but you get a totally different perspective. Mm-hmm. And there are so many places where the trains came first, or the trains go to places that you can't get to by car.
Oh, let's hear all about it.
So I thought we would talk about one place that a lot of people maybe have heard about or have seen pictures of, and that's a train ride through the Canadian Rockies. And so the Canadian Rockies are the northern extension of our Rocky Mountains.
Okay.
Yep. So you're talking about British Columbia and Alberta, mostly those two provinces. And the Canadian version of the Transcontinental Railroad runs all the way across Canada, all the way from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean. And so it ends in Vancouver, British Columbia. And in order to get there, it actually has to cross through the Canadian Rockies. And unlike in the United States, there's only one route that makes it through the Canadian Rockies. There are a couple in the United States. And this route is extremely scenic. It's quite high. It goes up and it goes down, and it has tunnels and twists and turns. And it's in a very, very, very remote part of Canada. There are really no towns. Nobody lives there. Incredible wildlife sighting opportunities. And it just happens to go through the big Canadian national parks, Banff National Park and Lake Louise National Park. So you have this really unique opportunity to start or end in Calgary, the big city where they have the Stampede, the big rodeo every year, and then head out into the Canadian Rockies. And you may not know that you've seen pictures of Banff or Lake Louise before, but there are those big old-fashioned hotels with the lakes that are like almost, you know, an azure green. I mean, just incredible, incredible water and mountains. And then you board the train, and the train takes you all the way to Vancouver. So it's a really neat way to see this part of Canada.
And what would you say is the time to do this? I know a lot of people go to Banff and go skiing.
Yeah, so the train only runs in the spring and the summer and the fall.
Because of the
winter,
right.
And, you know, it's those mountain passes in the winter can be a little treacherous, so perhaps it's best not to take a passenger train out in the winter. But the train starts up usually right around the 1st of April, and it goes through the end of November. So you have a choice of spring, summer, or fall. And of course, summer, you know, the big advantage to summer is you can have beautiful days like today, beautiful weather, more daylight. But in the spring and in the fall, you're actually probably going to see more wildlife because it's a much quieter time, you know, not just for tourists, but for everybody. So the wildlife is out and about. They're all having their babies. And so wildlife is quite abundant. You know, in the spring, you have everything coming to life. And in the fall, you just have those beautiful fall colors as well. So it's kind of a personal choice as to when you'd like to go, spring, summer, or fall.
So I'm very intrigued by there's just one way across the Rockies. Is it across or is it through?
It's kind of through. It's
okay.
kind of through, yep. So part of the time you're going to go up a hill. You might have tunnels. A lot of times you go along some of the rivers that cut through there. You know, if you Google pictures of this stretch of the Canadian Pacific Railroad, it's really, really rugged, really remote. Scenery is incredible. Train doesn't go very fast. It's pretty curvy line. And so, you know, it moves at a very nice pace, and you can really take in the scenery and enjoy it.
So how long of a train ride is this? You mentioned starting in Calgary, and where do we end?
Vancouver. So actually, they did an interesting thing. And back in the days when there were sort of real railroads that carried real passengers, there were regularly scheduled passenger trains that ran on this line. And the problem was that they would all run in the dark. So you would leave Vancouver, and it would get dark. And by the time you woke up the next day, you were already through the Canadian Rockies. So you never got to see anything. Oh. So a really enterprising Canadian came up with the idea of, well, instead of traveling at night, let's break this up into a 2-day trip. And halfway through, we'll stop and you'll get off the train and you'll stay in a hotel. And so the train actually takes 2 days. You get on it, you spend a full day traveling, you spend a night in a hotel, get back on it, and keep going to the other end. So it takes 2 days, and then, most people will want to see things before or afterwards as well. So you have a lot of opportunities, either independently or as part of an organized group, to explore Banff and Lake Louise and get off and see those things, and also the same in Vancouver.
So this isn't something where you're commuting from one city to another. Like a lot of people do use Amtrak to go on business trips.
No, this is a tourist train. So you can only get on or get off at the beginning or the end.
And it is run by a certain company?
Yep, it's run by a company called Rocky Mountaineer.
Okay.
And Rocky Mountaineer is a Canadian company. And it's been so successful that they've actually added some other routes as well. So they have a second route that runs north from Vancouver,
okay,
up through Whistler, where the Winter Olympics were. Was it 2018 or 2016? Sure. Up through Whistler, and then it goes up into really, really, really remote northern British Columbia, where really nobody lives. It's a very, very wild, forested area. And if you want to, you can actually sort of make a triangular trip where you go up one side, down the other side over the Canadian Rockies, and then go back to Vancouver. So it's been very successful, and so they've added a few routes in Canada, but that core trip across the Canadian Rockies is by far the most popular.
And it's because of the wildlife or the beauty of these
It's because
parks.
of the beauty. Yeah, it's just incredibly scenic. There's probably no place on Earth more scenic than this. And it also is something that you can combine with a cruise to Alaska. So if you've kind of had that Alaska cruise on your bucket list and you'd like to do something beforehand or afterwards, it combines really nicely with the cruise to Alaska. It's kind of a pre or post cruise extension.
So can you take the train back, or you just take it one way?
Most people take it one way. You could take it both ways. It's priced as kind of a luxury tour. You're not just buying a train ticket.
Sure.
They do have 2 classes of service on board.
Not the Empire Builder.
Not the Empire Builder, no. Although, Amtrak can be expensive too. But no, it's a 2-class train. So they have a silver level and a gold level. And so the silver level trains are single level cars with a glass roof. So you have a panoramic view. And then all of the meals and beverages and things are included on board. So in the silver section, they actually serve you a meal at your seat. A gourmet meal that's prepared on board. The gold section, they're actually double-decker railroad cars. So same principle as the ones you see on Amtrak here, but they have a glass dome on the top. So the whole upper level is all glassed in. So incredible views. And then the downstairs is a dining room. And so you can have your gourmet meals. Instead of having to sit at your seat, you go downstairs to a dining room and can enjoy them there.
And do they have private rooms?
No, there are no sleeping accommodations on the train. So
Okay.
it's just a day train. It's because you spend the night at that hotel halfway through.
And is the hotel remote, or is that nice too?
The hotels are in small towns that are kind of sort of railroad junction towns. So the hotels during the train trip itself are pretty basic, but before and afterwards you can stay in those gorgeous, incredible old railroad hotels that were built by the Canadian Pacific Railway. So that can be part of your trip too.
So that really was, back in the day, that really was the way to travel, wasn't it?
It really was, yeah. And it's, this definitely harkens back to kind of that golden age of travel. But it's modern. The trains are new. A lot of them are brand new. They've been built in the last 5 to 10 years. And so they're very comfortable. They have air conditioning and comfortable seats and spacious restrooms and things that old-fashioned trains didn't have.
Wow, so that's awesome, and we can learn more about that.
Yeah, I'd be happy to chat about that. And from time to time, I do presentations about rail travel. So the next time I have one, I will definitely let our listeners know, and they're welcome to come and listen.
So that is in Canada. What if we don't want to go to Canada for an experience like this? Is there anything similar in the United States?
Yeah, so interestingly enough, when COVID hit, Canada, of course,
Yes.
closed their borders, and they took a long time reopening them. So the folks who ran the Rocky Mountaineer kind of had a problem. They had all these train cars and no place to go. And so they approached the Union Pacific Railroad in the United States, and the Union Pacific agreed to allow them to operate a similar train in the Rocky Mountains here.
What?
In the United States.
So this is a new concept.
This is a new concept. It just started up last fall, and they had a very short season last fall because they kind of had to rush to get it out there. And it sold out like boom, like gone. The full season sold out. So they have a much more extensive season this year and next year. And this train starts in Denver.
Okay.
And it ends at a little town called Moab, Utah,
Sure.
in the Utah desert. And so you start out by going up the hill right behind the Rockies, right behind Denver.
Wah, wah.
Yeah, well, I think it's kind of cool. And you go through a tunnel, and then you basically spend 2 full days traveling through the Rockies. You'll stay overnight in Glenwood Springs, which is a really pretty Colorado mountain city. And then after you get to Moab in Utah, you can go home from there, or you can continue and explore all those national parks like Zion and Bryce and Arches and all those national parks that are down in that area. And then if you kind of just follow the logical road, you actually end up in Las Vegas. And so you can fly home from Las Vegas, which the good news is it's a really easy place to get home from.
It is, and,
Yeah.
and relatively inexpensive
Yep.
to fly in and out of.
Yeah.
So if you did end your trip in Moab, where would you fly in and out there?
You probably drive to Salt Lake City from there,
Okay.
a couple hours away.
Okay.
But most people who do it have, part of the reason you would do this is to see those different national parks. And so there are a lot of different ways to do that. Again, you can do it kind of independently with a rental car, or you can do it as part of more of an organized tour as well.
Well, these seem like this would be fun to do, but it seems like a lot to put together. How can you help us do that?
Yeah, so this is a trip I think that a lot of people maybe on the back of their bucket list have the idea of taking a train trip in the Rockies.
I
in the
didn't even
US
know
and
this
Canada.
was a
Yeah, and a lot of
thing.
people don't even know it, but there was a series on PBS that featured it, and so people are aware of it. But yeah, it's a very complicated trip to plan, a lot of different moving pieces.
Yes.
And so this is where, I love to sit down with folks and have a conversation and, talk about
Decide if you're gold or silver.
decide if you're gold or silver. And, it's very much mix and match. So you can do silver and stay at really nice hotels, or you can do gold and stay at more basic hotels. So very customizable vacation, a lot of moving pieces that we can put together to give you exactly what you want, which is kind of neat because sometimes you don't have that many options. You're kind of stuck with 2 pages in a brochure, and in this case, it's completely customizable.
This is really a unique vacation idea. I could see families doing this. I could see retired couples doing this. I mean, it really is something that would appeal to many people.
Yeah, it does. It tends to not appeal to very young children because you're on a train for a long period of time. But teenagers, there's so much to do, wildlife to see. They can actually go outside on the platforms on the train and look
Wow.
out and see. So if you happen to see a bear, or if you happen to see a moose, you can go outside and actually maybe hear it or smell it
Right.
as you go by. So definitely good for a variety of ages, but certainly folks who want to see this part of the country want to see it in comfort and want to see it as you can only see it from the train. It's a great choice.
So when Rocky Mountaineer approached Union Pacific, did they use the same tracks then?
Yeah, so all of these tracks are primarily freight tracks, just like the tracks here in Hastings, are
Okay.
primarily freight tracks, but they have a passenger train that runs on them.
Yes.
And so it's the same kind of a drill where they pay a fee to the railroad to rent, sort of rent space on the tracks.
That really was a great idea of them to approach the United States.
Yeah,
to
it really
see-
was. And, we have so many scenic rail trips in the United States, but, Amtrak isn't always the best venue to see them.
Right.
And so this gives people a really different option. And especially splitting the trip in half and staying overnight
Yeah.
means you don't miss part of it because it goes by in the dark. You get to see the whole thing. So I think it's a really cool idea, and it was immediately successful, which I think tells you it was a really good
So
idea.
you've heard great feedback from
Yes,
it.
and I actually had folks take both of these trips, and they've both come back just raving about them. And even sometimes maybe the husband is a little more into trains than the wife is, but it's a really nice experience, and they take really good care of you. The food is great. The onboard tour guides do a really nice job of explaining things and interpreting things. So people who have gone have really come back raving about it. And their question always is, well, where else do they go? And so up until now, there was no answer to that. So now we have one more option, and maybe in a few years they could do a trip down the Mississippi or something like that.
And the really nice thing I think about train travel is, for the most part, it's less of a hassle than flying.
It is. Yeah, now you'd have to fly to get to Calgary or Vancouver, but once you're there, you don't have to drive. You don't have to find a place to park. You don't have to worry about where you're going to eat. It's all taken care of for you.
And when you mentioned the food, I've been on some train rides. I've been shocked at how good the food is.
Yeah, and even Amtrak, I think, does a nice job
Yes.
with food, but this is gourmet food. They really do a nice job. This would be, the level of food you'd get at a nice restaurant or on a cruise.
And is this something that we would need a week for? 5 days? What do you think would be?
5 days would probably be about the shortest.
Okay.
The most common length is about a week.
Okay.
But you can stretch it out to 10 or 14 days. If you have a little more time and you want to do, 2 of the Canadian routes back to back, you can stretch it out a little more and see more and get to places that are even more off the beaten track than, the Rockies, some of those real remote parts of British Columbia that nobody ever goes to.
So do these trains run daily?
They do not. They run periodically.
Okay.
So sometimes they might run 3 days in a row, then take a day off. But they run quite frequently over the course of the season, more frequently in the middle of the summer, less frequently at the beginning or the end of the season.
So when you said that you could actually put together a vacation that would include perhaps the Canadian Rocky trip and the like a cruise to Alaska, how would that all work?
Well, you kind of start with the cruise schedule and figure out which cruise you want to go on, and then in most cases there will be a Rocky Mountaineer train that arrives in Vancouver the night before, or maybe 2 nights before. So you'd spend a couple nights in Vancouver, have a chance to explore that, get on your cruise ship, and go off on the cruise. And it's pretty seamless, actually. It works out really well.
If you have someone helping you.
If you have someone helping you. Yes, it does. That helps. That helps make it seamless. Absolutely.
Because this does seem very hard to put together on your own. Ted, how can we get a hold of you? This is like my new favorite thing.
Train travel.
Yeah, train travel.
Well, we'll have to talk about the Orient Express sometime.
Yes, exactly.
So the best way to get a hold of me is to give me a call at 651-964-8245. You can visit my website, which is www.tedblanktravel.com, or you can visit me on Facebook at facebook.com/tedblanktravel.
I love it. Great to see you.
Good to see you.
Woo, woo. We want to say thank you to our host, Ted Blank. The show is called The Travel Show on AM 1460 and FM 97.7 KDWA in Hastings. This travel show has been brought to you by Ted Blank, Luxury Travel and Adventure.